So as we continue to discuss the concept of perception, perception is basically all about meaning. What meaning do you assign to an event, to a word, to a look, to another, to a situation of any kind? What meaning do you assign to your beliefs about yourself, about how you grew up, about where you grew up? What meaning do you make out of your life? It's through these concepts where we start exploring and understanding the interactions between thoughts, between memory, between mind, between how we actually go on to form a self-image, to go on self-esteem, to go into all of our actions, our beliefs, everything revolving in a circular spiral nature, like gravity, like stars spiraling around a black hole. All of this is because of the power that we make an event have. This goes from everything to childhood traumas to our stories. Myself personally, I was overweight, I was a fat kid, I was picked on, I was embarrassed, I was shy, I was very low in self-esteem when it came to body image issues, which then facilitated over to being judged by others, always assuming that I knew what others were thinking, always assuming that when they looked at me, they were thinking a certain thing, or that they had a conversation going on inside their own mind, and I was always the subject and target of negative thoughts. Even if that wasn't the case, that was my story, and I believed it, and therefore lived it, causing myself so much more pain, so much more embarrassment, so much more problem than I needed to have or than I really had. I blew it up with dumping gasoline on a fire, and we all do this. It doesn't matter what we pick, it doesn't matter what your personal sore spot, soft spot, touchy situation is. To us, it seems paramount. If you've never had a weight problem, you think, you're just overweight, so what? If you have had a weight problem, to you, it's a whole different level of ball diamond. It's a whole nother issue. For me, it ended up making me so embarrassed and so ashamed that ultimately I went on to become anorexic and bulimic because I stopped eating so I could lose weight, because I hated myself and was miserable inside my own body because of how my body looked. Outer kingdom, inner kingdom, battling and struggling between each other, on, resulting in an imbalance which went from overweight to anorexic, bulimia. Then I ended up with ulcers and ended up in the hospital with bleeding ulcers. All of this because of my own mental imbalance with my outside world. That was this battle and this struggle between my inner kingdom and my outer kingdom. The way the outside world saw me and the way I was reflecting what I thought and how the outside world saw me was a huge source of grief and a major point for me that caused me to make all kinds of bad choices, all because of a perception that I had built in my own mind through my experiences, through words and actions that grew into my self-image and my self-perception. So needless to say, this whole imbalance was something that was a huge point in my life that ended up impacting me for years and years and years to come. The ultimate result of all of which I said earlier, no accidents, no coincidences. What I then realized is that after I went on from having no and very low self-esteem, ultimately I lost 50 pounds in one summer, came back to school my junior or senior year in high school, went from 205 pounds down to wrestling at 145 pounds in one summer, and ended up having everybody tell me how great I looked and how fantastic it was that I lost all this weight. And I went from being no ego and no self-image or self-esteem to all of a sudden being the other side of the circle, where now I was cocky, I was arrogant, I was, yeah, I'm the man, and all of those things. And it was completely a polar flip. But even up here, I was equally as out of balance. When we talk about the circle, I went from one side of the circle completely to the other side of the circle, skipped right through this middle balance point that I teach about, and went boom, straight through, and ended up being exactly the polar opposite. No esteem, way too much esteem, or pride, or ego, whatever you want to call it. And so it's that point that I realized both are equally problematic, both are equally erroneous. Balance, the center point. I'm not to think too highly of myself, but I'm also not to think too harshly and think too poorly of myself, because both are harmful to me, to my self-image, my self-esteem. Both will result in my choices being erroneous and misgiven, which will end up bringing me experiences that I also don't want. So it's this way that we start exploring our experiences and our outer world, as well as our internal worlds and the stories that we make up about events, about things, about people, about places, about times in our life. Most of us are still to this day, or in our adulthood, walking through life with something that plagued us as a child, and that underlying story is still a blueprint that is worked into our psyche. I still have subconscious issues where I'll notice things. I still, at my deepest core level, see myself as that fat little boy and lack self-confidence and self-esteem anytime I was afraid I would be judged. I wouldn't sing karaoke. I wouldn't public speak. I wouldn't do anything that would put me in the eye of others for them to judge me, because I hated and feared being judged so much that I wouldn't allow myself to get in the situation. So I avoided all situations that might put me in the seat of judgment of others. That ended up becoming a major problem and creating fears and creating phobias, which I had to fight for years to overcome those, because those were deeply embedded, deeply rooted at the core of my being. Finally, the problem of, the fear of judgment was overcome through facing my fear, doing the opposite. Where I wouldn't sing karaoke, I now made myself go sing karaoke. Where I wouldn't public speak, I made myself go public speak, until I got to the point where I could laugh at myself, where I could be, I don't care what other people think, I'm just here to have fun with my friends, or I'm just here to improve myself, face my fear, what have you. And so in that way, I was able to overcome these fears of judgment. And so it's through that example that I want you to open up to your own inner issues of, childhood issues that you carried around or that might still be with you, and realize how they create fears within us that follow us on different levels, but from that same root of being judged as a fat child to assuming that the whole world was watching me and had an opinion, a negative opinion, and was talking about me and judging me, to always fearing any situation where I might be judged. So it's with that that we can dissect and break down the root and the cause, the problem, the issue, the choice, the experience, all stemming from a misgiven perception that we have about ourselves or about a situation or an event. Truth is, I was just a fat kid. Truth is that I outgrew it or grew out of it. Truth is that I'm just me, I'm just a person. The truth is that I need to be in balance just like everyone else, and we all need those things. I think life is very entertaining in that way, because it seems to me anytime I've ever had things too ego, I was feeling too proud of myself, something always came along to knock me off my wall and bring me back into balance. This is what I think and believe the circles of life is all about.